Recording in progress.
Good evening. This is Mary Ellen McKay, Chair of the City of Nashua Zoning Board of Adjustment, and this is the February 8th, 2022 Zoning Board meeting. This evening's meeting will be conducted in a hybrid format. The meeting is accessible in person in the third floor auditorium of Nashua City Hall, 229 Main Street, and via Zoom at the link posted in all public meeting agendas. Attendance via telephone is available using the Zoom connection details. Minutes of tonight's meeting, as well as audio and video recordings, will be available later at nashuanh.gov/agenda center, select Zoning Board of Adjustment. If anyone has a problem accessing the meeting, please call 603-821-2049 and they will help you connect. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting via the methods mentioned above, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. The chair is in control of the meeting. To the extent practicable and advisable, the board will follow the procedures as identified in its bylaws. The applicant will present their case for 15 minutes, followed by questions by the board. Next persons wishing to speak in favor or with questions or opposition will be asked to speak for up to 5 minutes. If there are questions or opposition, the applicant will have 5 minutes to present a response. Finally, one and only one person with questions or in opposition will be permitted to speak again before the board deliberates and determines an outcome. A light timer is used to manage speaking time. It will change from green to yellow when 1 minute is left and change to red when the speaker's time has expired. If you are participating by Zoom and wish to speak when public input is requested, please use the raise hand option, which can be found under Reactions on a computer or the More menu on a phone. The chair will call you in turn. Please use the lower hand option when done. Please mute your microphone until called to speak. Note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call. Tonight we will be hearing requests for deviation from the Nashua, I just want to check and make sure, zoning code in the form of applications for variances and special exceptions. A special exception is a request that seeks permission to do something that the zoning ordinance permits only under special circumstances. To grant a special exception, 5 points of law are required to be met. These are outlined in the application and will be summarized in board motions. A variance is a request that seeks permission to do something that the ordinance does not permit. Variances have also 5 points of law that must be met, different from those for special exceptions. Per the City of Nashua bylaws and State of New Hampshire revised statutes, a minimum of 3 or more affirmative votes are required to approve any application. In addition, this board will hear all scheduled cases if a quorum of 3 voting board members is present at this meeting. Any citizen has the right to contest the decision that this board makes. Should we make a decision that you believe is in error, you have the right to request a rehearing. A written rehearing request must be received by the City of Nashua Planning Department within 30 calendar days from the date of the decision. Should this board not grant a rehearing request, you can file an appeal directly to the Nashua Superior Court. Please contact Mr. Falk of the Planning Department for more information. For this meeting, we have the following full board members in attendance. Myself, Mary Ellen McKay, as chair, and Steve Lionel as vice chair. We have Jack Currier here as our clerk, and J.P. Boucher is also here. We have Jay Mancara and Nick Kanakis, who are our alternate members. We also have Mr. Carter Falk, the deputy planning manager, and Ms. Kate Poirier, the zoning coordinator. Let us start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. For board members participating by Zoom, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you, which is required under the right to know law, and state your reason for not attending in person. Okay, I will take the roll. Steve Lionel,
Present.
Jack Currier. You're muted, sir.
Hopefully you can hear me now. I'm present. I am here on Zoom. I am not at City Hall. I've been traveling and I just returned to Nashua and I was able to get to my house, but not to City Hall. And that's it for me.
Thank you.
Jack, will you be serving as clerk tonight?
Yes, I'm good to go. Is that, if that's all right with you, Steve?
Yep, that's fine. Just want to know.
Okay.
Mr. Boucher.
Present.
Thank you. And we have Mr. Jamin Kara
Present.
and Mr. Nick Kanakis.
Present.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay. Also this evening, since there are 4 regular members, we will have an alternate member, alternate for each case. And I will start with Mr. Kanakis. He will vote on case 1. And we will go from there. Alternates may fully participate in discussions, but will only vote if a full board member recuses themselves or if there are fewer than 5 full board members in attendance for tonight's meeting. And I will begin with the first case.
Did you read the part about having to raise your hand in Zoom?
Oh, no. Yes, I think I did.
Okay.
And with the, yes, I did read the part because we talked about where they could find it under.
Yep, great. I just didn't hear it.
No, that's, thank you. It's always better to ask a question than get it wrong. Always better to have a second opinion. Okay, our first case this evening, excuse me, Andrew and Alexa Morrissey, owners, 24 Vespa Lane, Sheet G, Lot 313, requesting a variance from Land Use Code Section 190-16, Table 16-3, to encroach between 5 feet and 7 feet into the 20-foot required left side yard setback to construct an attached 2-car garage with bedroom above. This is in the R18 zone, and it's in Ward 2. Is there somebody here to present this case?
Online, Andrew Morrissey.
Yes, I'm here for this. It's Andrew Morrissey. I'm the homeowner.
Okay, Mr. Morrissey, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes to present your case, sir.
Okay. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Andrew Morrissey. I live at 24 Vespa Lane in Nashua with my wife Alexa and my 8-month-old son Connor. Just give me 1 sec. I've been a lifelong resident of the city of Nashua, and together we've been living here for the past 5 years. Both my wife and I work in the city. Alexa is a physician's assistant, and she works at Southern New Hampshire Medical Center, and I work for the fire department. We're before you tonight to request a variance for an addition to our property. The purpose of the variance is to allow for our growing family the space that we need to continue to live in the home that we own right now, and simultaneously do some necessary updates to our home. With current market conditions, it makes more financial sense for us to build onto our current home than to move, especially with limited inventory and wanting to stay here in the city. As it sits today, our house is just under 1,100 square feet. It's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath raised ranch, and we are proposing the addition of a 24-foot by 31.5-foot. It would be a master suite over a 2-car garage, and this would bring us to a total of 4 bedrooms, 2 baths on the main living floor, and would greatly increase our storage in our basement, which is much needed, especially with a growing family. We chose to do the 24 feet because that's basically the minimum that you could get for a functioning 2-car garage space. So that brought us an encroachment onto the 20-foot setback to our neighbors. And because our house doesn't sit square to the road, it's a varying encroachment. So it's 5 feet at the closest point to the road. And we would be encroaching 7 feet at the furthest point towards our backyard, as you can see from our architect drawings, which are on the agenda. And if you'd like, I can go through the questions. I noticed that they were attached to the agenda, but our statement that we attached on our variance application.
Are you good with your testimony, with your application in speaking to the board right now? Would you be comfortable with the board asking questions?
I'm comfortable with that. I just wanted to make sure, I'm assuming because it was on the agenda that you guys had the opportunity to read over the application. I've never gone through this process, so I'm not fully aware of how it works.
Oh, no, sir. We get the packet well in advance, and each board member does their due diligence. They do read, and they do go out and do site visits. It's incumbent upon us, and we do so. But if you have other explanations or anything you want to add, please, this is still your time. It's your application.
No, so that's all I have that I wanted to present to you guys tonight.
Does any member of the board have any questions of the applicant? I see Mr. Courier has his hand raised.
Yes, my question is, I was just wondering if there was any thought on the left side and on the height, if there was any possibility for reduction on that, or what went along, in maybe the thought process. I noticed that it kicks to the street about 2.5 feet from the front of the existing house, and in the back side, it kicks back it juts out about 2.5 feet. So that ends up with, about 30 or 31 foot of depth. I guess my concern with that is while it was hard, I went and site walked before I got the plan. I did the site walk a couple weeks ago, but I was maybe afraid of kind of an imposing height on the neighbor to the left, and I didn't know if you could comment as to what you think, if that would be imposing or not imposing to the abutting property.
I don't think that it'll be imposing. At our closest point, we're still going to have about 13 feet from their property line. We did a lot of due diligence. Actually, I believe my architect is on this call. I'm using Rebecca and Matt Desterall. Yep, they're here. So we basically ran through a whole bunch of different options to try to get what we needed, which was the addition of the bathroom was going to be huge for us, and to fit the bathroom in the master bedroom, it also expanded our living room a bit. We really weren't going to be able to do it with the 1-car garage, so that's why we pushed out for we added the 2 cars, and that gave us all the space that we needed. And like I stated, the 24-foot was basically the bare minimum to get a functioning 2-car garage.
Okay, I guess just a follow-up question is on the view that Kate just had there on the second floor. That was, there's I think if she pulls up, it's the 1 page above. Right there is a great view. There's in the proposed new area, we have the master bedroom, and then between the master bedroom and the bathroom, there's a room. And then as we look at this view, in the top right corner, there's a room. I was just wondering, what are those 2 rooms they're going to be in?
So the one that's above, that the arrow's on right now, above the living room, is going to be a pantry, basically just food storage. That's going to be behind our kitchen, and then the other one is going to be a closet, walk-in closet. So that's basically the main reason why we're doing this addition is we kind of realized when we had our first child that this house was perfect for the two of us, and adding a child has taken away a lot of necessary storage space. So that was kind of the big reason that was pushing us to do the addition, was to maximize as much storage as we could get.
All right, thank you for that answer.
Mr. Courier, Matt Deser here, I'm the architect of record. I wanted to actually build off of a point
Excuse
Andrew
me.
was making.
Who's speaking?
Sorry, my name is Matt Deser, I'm the architect that Andrew's working with.
Oh, okay, if you want to speak, it's,
Well, if I could just jump in, Mr. Morrissey was, I felt he was introducing the architect,
okay.
but was also answering the question himself. So I guess I was kind of anticipating Mr. Deserolt to chime in as well.
Okay, then if you could please state your name and address clearly for the record.
Absolutely. My name is Matthew Desero. I live at 42 Syracuse Road in Nashua.
Okay,
So I want to touch real quick on Mr. Courier's comment about the height of the building. And I just want to speak a little bit about the design. Obviously, if you look straight onto the existing house, you're looking at the front half of a gable. And if you just extend that all the way across, that's going to actually be more intrusive than what we did. We actually designed it in a way that we turned the gable and made it kind of like a hip roof, because that would actually allow more light to actually penetrate to the neighbor's property. So it's, in a way, we designed it so that it doesn't feel like we're building this huge, massive 3-story structure next to the neighbor. We're actually trying to keep it small, and that's why we designed the roof the way that we did.
Okay, thank you for that clarification on the roof line.
does anyone else on the board have any questions? Seeing none, we do have one letter here, which I will read into the record in support of this application. To whom it may concern, we are writing in regards to the land use variance requested at 24 Vespa Lane. We have no objections to same. Andrew and Alexa Morrissey are exceptional neighbors and have been a joy to have met. The fact that they both serve our community, Andrew as a firefighter, Alexa as an RN, is exactly the young people we should all encourage to live in the neighborhood. They are very conscientious as neighbors. We hope the variance is approved and encourage all to vote in favor as we do. We look forward to them being neighbors forever. Sincerely, Timothy Reed and Jean Reed, owners of 25 Vespa Lane. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in support of this application? Is there anybody on Zoom who would like to speak in support of this application? Seeing none and no hands raised, is there anyone here who has questions, comments, concerns, or objections to this application? Don't see any here. And anyone on Zoom wish to speak with any comments, questions, concerns, or opposition to the application? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Mr. Lionel, sir.
I'm in support of the application. The approach they're taking actually is something that I did many, many years ago in a previous house. And the encroachment is not too big on the wide side setback. And it looks very attractive, and we have support of one of the neighbors, I guess across the street. So I would support it.
Thank you. Mr. Courier, sir.
A couple thoughts. I mean, overall, I'm in support. I was having concern about the appearance of to the abutter on the left. I'm not sure what address that is. But we're not hearing any opposition. I think a favorable point of this application is the architectural design. I mean, in my experience, well, it seems to me that they've put a lot of thought into this, into a design that'll work. And then when this happens, there's usually not surprises. In other words, something that gets built that's not what we're thinking or what was planned. In my mind, what'll get built is exactly what's planned here, and I think it's well thought out for the owners. And again, we're not hearing any opposition of it being too big. I mean, I think it might be a little bigger than most of the houses on the street, but not grossly so. So with all of that, in short, I feel it meets the criteria, and I'm in support of it.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher.
I support the application. I think it's a reasonable request for a two-car garage, what they're doing. And again, slightly unique is the fact that the house is not square to the property, so that's why we're getting a couple extra feet on the back corner. But again, I don't think from the street that you would know there was a couple extra feet on the ask for that. So I support the application as submitted.
Thank you. Mr. Minkara.
I also support the application. I think the two-car garage is a reasonable customary use, particularly in our climate. The additional square footage, the existing house is small. The additional square footage, I think, for a living space is also reasonable, although that doesn't impact the encroachment. And realistically, there is no other place on the lot to put this and meet the requirement. The garage is not oversized, at 24 feet in width. That's typical. And there are also other homes in the neighborhood, including immediately next door, that don't meet the current setback.
Thank you. Mr. Kanakis.
I'm also in support of the application. It looks to be a well-thought-out plan, but lots on this side of Vespa Lane are a bit narrower than those on the other side, which limits the design possibilities, but it appears they took care to put something together that would have a minimal impact on the neighbors, and I think the utility that it adds outweighs any potential negative impacts. So I'm also in support.
Thank you. And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I'm also in support for all the aforementioned reasons. Is there someone who would like to make a motion? And Mr. Kanakis, I will refresh that you will be voting in this case. Thank you, Mr. Boucher.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the area variance for Andrew and Alexa Morrissey, owners of 24 Vespa Lane, Sheet G, Lot 313, requesting a variance from Land Use Code Section 190-16, Table 16-3, to encroach between 5 feet and 7 feet into the 20-foot required left yard setback to construct an attached two-car garage with a bedroom above. It's in the R18 zone, Ward 2. We find that the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property, and the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the variance. Again, we just spoke about the fact that the house is slightly at an angle, that two-car garage is, as stated by Mr. McCara, customary ask in this climate, and the lots are not as wide to accept the addition of a two-car garage, so hence why they're asking for the variance. We find it is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. We find it will not adversely affect property values of surrounding parcels. We find it's not contrary to public interest, and we find that substantial justice will be served. So again, I make a motion to approve the area variance.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Lionel, for your second. Okay, Mr. Lionel, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Courier, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
Mr. Kanakis, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. Kanakis votes in favor.
And Mary Ellen McKay also votes in favor. That is a unanimous decision of 5-0. And Mr. Morrissey, congratulations, your variance has been granted. As we tell people, you have 30 days for anyone to approach and, register any issue or concern with any decision this board makes. And if you have any questions, please refer back to Mr. Falk in the planning department or Ms. Poirier. But thank you for your time tonight, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your time.
Case number 2. Sorry, the page will not turn. Okay. Elizabeth E. Robbins, owner, Christine and Carl Robbins, applicants, 35 Edgewood Avenue, sheet 60, lot 97, requesting variance from Land Use Code, section 190-16, table 16-3, to encroach 4 feet into the 10-foot required right yard side setback to remove an existing attached one-car garage in Breezeway and construct a new attached two-car garage. This is in the RA zone in Ward 2. Is there somebody here to present this application?
I am. I am Christine Robbins, and I live at 44 Edgewood Avenue in Nashua.
Thank you. The floor is yours, Christine.
My husband Carl and I come before the board tonight as applicants for a variance on the property located at 35 Edgewood Avenue. Carl's sister Elizabeth Robbins is the owner of said property. She's requested our assistance to represent her here this evening and has supplied her written authorization on the variance application. This family residence was built in 1951 by Carl and Elizabeth's father, who passed away in 1976. Their mother recently passed away last April. The 70-year-old house is in need of repair. As stated, this project is to remove an existing attached one-car garage in Breezeway and construct a new attached two-car garage. Just like the existing garage, the outside wall will need to encroach 4 feet into the required 10-foot right side yard setback. Granting of the requested variance will not be contrary to the public interest because the proposed new construction will directly replace the existing structure that has stood in place since 1951. The proposed use will observe the spirit of the ordinance because the proposed construction complies with the use requirements and meets the front, back, and other side lot setback requirements. It's not feasible to modify the plan to conform to the side lot setback due to where the house was originally established on the lot. The proposed construction represents the least intrusive solution possible. Substantial justice would be done to the property owner by granting the variance because it would allow for better use of the property without serious injustice to the butters. It's apparent by visual review of other homes on the same street or by review of an assessor's map that many of the existing homes on this street do not meet all of the current building restriction setbacks. The proposed use will not diminish the values of the surrounding properties because the construction will enhance the existing dwelling. It will be built in keeping with the aesthetic sense of the neighborhood and contribute to a future higher resale value of the property. And the fifth point would be that special conditions exist such that literal enforcement of the ordinance results in unnecessary hardship. Because of the unique placement of the house on the lot, it would prevent alternative development. The property's been used in the same manner, encroaching 4 feet into the 10-foot right yard setback since 1951 before the zoning ordinances became effective. That's it. We thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher has questions for you.
Just to clarify, I know the answer, but just to hear it from you. Basically, this new addition is not going to encroach any more than the existing breezeway and garage on the right side setback. I did notice that you're going to come out front a little bit, but again, you're not violating any other setbacks with this new addition.
Correct.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for the applicant? Oh, Mr. Courier.
Yeah, I just wondered, was this, maybe I missed it, was this proposed to be a one-story garage, one-story structure?
Yes, it is just the garage. There is no room over the garage.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions from the board, I'm going to ask if anyone here would like to speak in favor of the application. Seeing no one, I'm going to look to Zoom to see if anybody would like to speak in favor of this application. Seeing none, I'm going to ask if anyone here has any opposition, questions, or concerns about this application. I see none here. And on Zoom, is there anyone who has any concerns, questions, or opposition to the application? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Mr. Boucher.
I'm in full support of the application. Again, it's clear that, as the applicant stated, pre-zoning laws, this was an existing structure. The applicant is going to replace the structure, put a new garage with no more incursion than the existing garage that's there now, just in a different location, but again, not violating any other setbacks or, front, side, or rear setbacks. So I'm in full support of the application.
Thank you. Mr. Minkara.
I also fully support the application for the reasons stated, and again, would just add that, it is a reasonable customer use, and there is no alternative location on the lot. These are fairly small lots, so there really is no other place to put it.
Thank you. Mr. Kanakis.
I'm also in support for the reasons stated.
Mr. Lionel.
And I am also in support for the reasons stated.
Mr. Courier.
I'm also in support. I think the application is complete, and I just wanted to reiterate, as Mr. Boucher said, that it's not encroaching anymore. It's keeping in kind with the encroachment that's there now, and that's a special condition on the property. So I'm in support.
Thank you. And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I am also in support of the application. And in this case, Mr. Minkara, you will be voting. Would somebody care to make a motion? Mr. Lionel, thank you.
I'd like to make a motion on behalf of owner Elizabeth E. Robbins, and the applicant are Christine and Carl Robbins. The address is 35 Edgewood Avenue, sheet 60, lot 97. Requesting variance from Land Use Code Section 190-16, Table 16-3, to encroach 4 feet into the 10-foot required right side yard setback to remove an existing attached 1-car garage in Breezeway and construct a new attached 2-car garage. This is in the RA Zone Ward 2. The board finds that the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property. When this house was built, this was previous to the zoning ordinances, and the footprint, the side footprint is not being changed, so there was going to be no increased excursion into the setback. The lot is small, and therefore the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the variance. The board believes this is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. We find that it will, we have no evidence that it will adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels. It is not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice will be served. So I make a motion to approve this area variance.
Thank you, Mr. Boucher, for your second. Mr. Boucher, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Minkara, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. Minkara votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Courier, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
And Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor. So congratulations. Mrs. Robbins, the variance has been granted. You have, or we have 30 days, please, in case somebody has any comments or concerns, that anyone can question any decision made by this board, and they have that time frame with which to do so. But other than that, your variance has been granted, and thank you very much for your presence this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move to case number 3, And in case number 3, Steve, our vice chair, will be taking over. I am recusing myself from this case.
Okay. We'll take a moment while Ms. McKay exits. Case number 3, the owner is the Poulin Family Trust. Applicant is Carol and Michael Poulin, address 4 Hopkins Street. Sheet 66, Lot 22, requesting variance from Land Use Code Section 190-16, Table 16-3 for a minimum land area, 11,945 square feet existing, 18,668 square feet required, to convert a single-family with approved accessory dwelling unit into a 3-family home. This is in the RB Zone Ward 3. Is there somebody here to present the case? Is somebody? Okay, would you please step up to the lectern, give your name and address for the record, and walk us through your application?
Hi, my name is Carol Poulin. I live at 4 Hopkins Street in Nashua. It's my husband, Michael. And we are making this request because first of all, both my husband and I grew up in Nashua. When we got married, we moved to Merrimack. We lived in Merrimack for about 30 years. And about almost 7 years ago, we moved back to Nashua because of our son, Brandon, who is 32 years old and experiences autism. We were trying to have Brandon live independently, and he was at Cotton Mill when Cotton Mill first opened up. And the reason why we looked at Nashua was because Brandon will never be able to drive, and so we wanted him to have access to community transportation, be able to, walk in and be somewhat independent. He lived there for about a year, and it did not work out. We felt like he needed more support. So we sold our family home in Merrimack and moved to Nashua, to Hopkins Street. At the time we bought the home was had an illegal in-law apartment. So we worked with the planning board to make that a legal apartment as soon as I had everything set up, even before we closed, so that we could get everything going once we closed on this property. So we've been living there now about 7 years, and our hope was that Brandon would not need as much support as he does need. Brandon, like I said, is living with autism and doesn't really have, although he's high functioning and he has a job, he's 100% supported on the job because of his social deficit. He has no social filter, which kind of means that he will just say whatever he's thinking. And it's not always, it comes out rude, and a lot of times people just don't react positively to that. So we started looking to see if, okay, we're gonna see if we can buy another home and we can build in some supports so that he could still live independently, but kind of have somebody just checking in with him, make sure he's okay. He's also, he's very vulnerable and could be easily exploited. So that was another big concern of ours. The housing market is, as you know, it's in short supply. There are no homes out there, and the ones that are far beyond our means. So we started looking at, well, why don't we see if we can do something in our home? The downstairs of our current home is very big for the two of us. At a point in our life when we should be downsizing, we kind of upsized when we moved. So what we were hoping to do was, we're not changing the structure of the outside of the home. The gross living area would remain the same. We're kind of working within the means of the space that we have within the home. And we would like to be able to split the downstairs into 2 units, one that my husband and I would stay in, and then one that Brandon would stay. And that in-law apartment that is on the 2nd floor would become a area for a support person to be able to either, live there or have somebody come in, sort of like if you think about a college having like an RA in the dorm, it'd be something similar to that, but that would also be that person's home. The 3 units would all be relatively like one-bedroom units. I know that one of our neighbors had expressed some concern. We had actually went and talked with all of our neighbors and gave them a letter of what we're trying to do, because we felt like some of our neighbors might have thought we were planning on making this a 3-family and then moving. That's not our plan. The home is in a trust. It will be Brandon's forever home. So we're just trying to plan for when my husband and I are no longer here, and we're trying to put supports and build a community around our son. Brandon works in Nashua. He does all his shopping. You know, he knows the cab system. He's very good about getting around in the community, the bus system, and all of those things. So this is his community. Anything to add?
So do you have anything else that you want to add at this time before the board asks questions?
No, bring it.
Okay. Because Ms. McKay has recused herself, both Mr. Mancara and Mr. Kanakis will be voting on this case.
Sure.
Any board members have questions? Mr. Mancara.
I wonder if I could ask the applicant to speak to what are the special conditions of the property that make it different or distinct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat
What are
that?
the special conditions of the property? You've spoken about your personal needs and your family issues, but what are the conditions about the property that make it special or distinct from other properties in the surrounding area?
So it's the location and the size of the first floor, which makes it, I mean, we could easily make it into 2 units and still have plenty of room in each unit. But it's also the location. It's pretty ideal for our son in being able to get to the bus station. He can get down to Main Street. He can get to the library. He can get to work. And the outside is, the driveway is large enough so that if we were able, if we had another car there, Brandon will never be able to drive, so the only 2 cars right now are mine and my husband's. And then, that support person who would be living in the second floor unit. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Courier.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I have to confess, I'm not all that familiar, because I don't think the board has ever considered it, but there's like a handicap exception, and I'm wondering maybe if Mr. Lionel, maybe you're familiar with it, or Mr. Falk is familiar with it?
I have it right here.
Oh, great. Well, there you go.
Okay, so what Mr. Courier is referring to is part of the New Hampshire Revised Statutes annotated, 674-33, and Section 5, or V, says, notwithstanding subparagraph IA2, any zoning board of adjustment may grant a variance from the terms of a zoning ordinance without finding a hardship arising from the condition of a premises subject to the ordinance, when reasonable accommodations are necessary to allow a person or persons with a recognized physical disability to reside in or regularly use the premises, provided that, A, any variance granted under this paragraph shall be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance, and B, in granting any variance pursuant to this paragraph, the zoning board of adjustment may provide in a finding included in the variance that the variance shall survive only so long as the particular person has a continuing need to use the premises. That's what you wanted to hear about? Okay.
Yes, thank you for reciting that, because I didn't remember it and knew it was out there. But thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I guess my question was, I didn't know if the applicant, I'm sorry, that's what started all this, was aware of that possibility, and if there was a consideration of that.
Yes, I was just made aware of that today.
And so
Okay.
would you be willing to accept a condition that the variance would persist only so long as Brandon was living in the house?
So I guess my confusion would be like, well, what happens, like, okay, if you granted the variance based on that, and we moved to separate the units, and now there's 3 units. If something happens to Brandon, do we go back to 1 unit? Like, I don't know how you undo something that you've built.
Well, you're asking for a 3rd unit, and if I understand the way this works, that if we added that condition to the variance, and Brandon was no longer living there, then it would go back to a 2-unit. You would have the basic unit and the accessory dwelling unit that you have today. And so the 3rd apartment, so to speak, would not be legally rentable to anybody.
Okay.
So, given that, if the board believes that such a condition is necessary to grant approval of the variance, would you be willing to accept that condition?
Do you understand it? Okay. Yeah, I mean, our plan is, this is Brandon's forever home, so I think he's going to be there until he's not, so.
Yeah. I mean, the
Yes.
reason we ask is that variances run with the land typically. And so if we were to grant an unconditional variance, it would persist even if you sold the house and everybody moved out. And then that would become essentially a 3-unit house. And, you know, the board may be uncomfortable with that.
Okay.
Just theorizing here. So the RSA gives the board the right to, generally, as I said, variances run with the land and don't have that sort of expiration. But in this particular case, if the board could add a condition that says this variance goes away if Brandon is no longer living in that house. So what our question is, would that be an acceptable condition to you?
Yes, I believe it would be. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Courier, did you have any further questions?
No, I'm all set. Thank you for
Okay.
clarifying that, Mr. Lino.
All right, any other board members with questions? No? I had a sort of simple question is, do you have somebody lined up as a live-in assistant for Brandon yet? Or, not that this is really a condition of the board, but I was curious as to whether you had started a search for somebody.
No, we do not. We haven't, we figured we wouldn't broach that until we knew that it was a possibility. Most likely, we would work with a vendor agency to help us get somebody.
Okay, I see no more questions from the board. We do have a, well, no, actually, I'll get to that in a moment. Is there anybody, well, there's nobody present in the room other than people I already know. Is there anybody on Zoom who wishes to speak in favor of this application? I'm not seeing any hands raised, okay. There's nobody in the room with questions, concerns, or opposition. We do have a letter, which I will get to in a moment. Is there anybody on Zoom with questions, concerns, or opposition to this application? Not seeing any? Okay. We have a letter, actually, we have 2 messages from Philip Roizen at 6 Hopkins Street, one of your neighbors. And he initially objected to the proposal and had some, he was sent some further information, and he says, well, the lot currently has very little yard. He was thinking that it was just going to be turned into a 3-family house unrestricted. And but then he wrote, he says, I spoke to Mike and am sympathetic. I would be okay with it if there is some guarantee house will not be sold for at least 15 years. That sort of condition we would typically not do, but the condition that the variance expires if Brandon is no longer living there, that we are allowed to do. So he had that concern, and I hope, since I don't see him on the meeting, I'm going to assume that that condition would be acceptable to him. because he doesn't want the house to be flipped and then turned into a
Sure, I
a
understand.
three-family house. Okay. So there's no other questions, concerns, opposition. I will close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Mr. Courier, your comments?
Well, I just would start off by saying I feel I have to thank Michael and Carol Poland for their obviously good and continued care of Brandon. But getting back to zoning, while my heart goes out to the situation there, I think the handicap stipulation, if we just call it that for short, is appropriate here. I'm seeing that it meets the criteria of that exception, the handicap exception, very strongly. But when we look at just the land and the lot, I don't think it warrants a 3-unit. So I'm perfectly fine with the handicap exception, and I would not be without it, and that's where I'm at. So I would fully support it if that were put in as a stipulation.
Thank you, Mr. Courier. Mr. Mancara?
I agree. I would support the application with the stipulation, as discussed.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher?
I agree with what's been said so far.
Okay. Mr. Kanakis?
I also agree with the board.
And I, Mr. Lionel, also agree that I would vote to approve this with the stipulation that the variance would last only as long as Brandon is living in the house. So would somebody care to make a motion, including that stipulation?
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Boucher, thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the area variance for the Poulin Family Trust owners, Carol and Michael Poulin, applicants, 4 Hopkins Street, sheet 66, lot 22, requesting variance from Land Use Code Section 190-16, Table 16-3 for a minimum land area, 11,945 square feet existing, 18,668 square feet required to convert a single-family with an approved accessory dwelling unit into a 3-family home. Is that how we're gonna word this?
Well,
How would it-
it's 2 units plus an ADU. I'm not sure. Mr. Falk, how do we do, what do we call this?
Well, it would, just like you said, Mr. Lionel, it'll be 2 units plus an ADU.
Okay.
That's really what it is, but.
Yeah, because the ADU has its own special requirements that were agreed to earlier, and changing it into a 3-unit would not be the right thing to do.
I mean, even though there's 3 units in there, 3
Yes.
kitchens, all that, it would really be,
So 2-family with
it's
an
really
ADU?
2 units with an ADU.
Two-
so
yeah.
So can we, so we call it a
You can call it
2-family with an
that.
ADU?
You can call it that.
Okay. So I'm going to just amend that, say with an approved accessory dwelling unit into a 2-family or 2-unit home with an ADU. It's in RB Zone, Ward 3. We find that the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of property and the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue than the variance. Again, we will make a special condition on this variance, but again, this is primarily in front of us. The applicant is looking to care for their son that needs care, and we will describe the special conditions at the end. We find it is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. We find it will not adversely affect property values of surrounding parcels. We find it's not contrary to public interest, and we find that substantial justice will be served. So on this particular application and in the motion, we are going to grant this with condition that the variance will only last as long as the applicant's son, who they've named as Brandon, is living in the property. And once Brandon is no longer living at the property, then it again would revert back to a 1-family with an approved ADU. That's an existing approval. So that is the special condition of the motion. So with that, again, I make a motion to approve the area variance.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Kanakas, for your second. Any discussion of the motion? Mr. Courier?
Mr. Lionel, could you repeat that RSA? I think it might be important to have that in the stipulation, the RSA number.
Sure.
Cited.
Yeah, this is, it's from RSA 674:33, Section 5, or V. That paragraph is about, and then subsection B gives a zoning board permission to have a finding included in the variance that the variance shall survive only so long as the particular person has a continuing need to use the premises. You were sent an email earlier today by Ms. Poirier with a copy of this. And actually, Mr. Falk had sent one previously to that. So you should have the text of that available to you.
Okay, thank you. Got it.
Okay, so that was discussion of the motion. Any further discussion of the motion? Mr. Courier, how do you vote?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
Mr. Mancara, how do you vote?
Mr. Mancara votes in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Kanakis, how do you vote?
Mr. Kanakis votes in favor.
And I, Mr. Lionel, vote in favor. It's 5-0. Your variance has been approved with the condition that we've been discussing. Please be aware, there's a 30-day window of appeal. Contact the planning department if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you.
And good luck to you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And Ms. McKay will resume her chair duties, so please give us a moment. Do you have something else?
Thank you.
That's good.
Thank you, Mr. Lionel, for doing that. Mike and Carol live around the corner from me. Carol and I worked together for years, and I felt I should step aside.
Could you
Okay.
clarify who's voting on this case, Ms. McKay? Could you clarify
Yes.
the?
On this case, it will be Mr. Mancara. Okay. Let me go to this. All right. H0DA44 Revocable Living Trust, care of Timothy Hogan, owner. Timothy Hogan, applicant, 29 Sullivan Street, sheet 61, lot 110, requesting the following. Special exception from Land Use Code Section 190-47B for a major home occupation for motorcycle service in a detached garage. And 2, variance from Land Use Code Section 190-47B3 to allow home occupation use in a detached accessory structure where it is required that the home occupation be carried on strictly in principal building. This is in the RA zone in Ward 2. And Mr. Hogan, I see you via Zoom. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm not even sure where to start with this. So my understanding of home occupation is that, it's intended to be in the principal structure. So one part of it is when we had the garage built in 2015, we chose to have it as a detached garage so as to not affect the original structure. The structure was built in 1942, and it's similar to all the other ones on the street. So we didn't want to affect its image, so we put it out back so it would blend in more with some of the other houses that are in the neighborhood with the detached garage. So that was kind of intention to keep with the spirit of the neighborhood. And then now, 7 years later, my hobby's kind of become a little bit bigger. and I've wanted to take on and start doing more things. And in looking at the home occupation, it specifically says it has to be in the primary structure. So I'm just asking that I'm allowed to do basically what I have been doing on my own stuff, but on other people's motorcycles, is one of the variances. And then I'm not actually certain why we got two. When I called and spoke to the woman on the phone, she was the one that set us up with the major home occupation, which I think was the square footage size, and then the variance for it not being in the principal building. So those are kind of the two variances, is what I'm trying to do, so that there'd be no modifications to any of the property. Everything is pre-existing. It's from my own personal hobby. I race motorcycles. My family has a lot of motorcycles, so I just in maintaining those is why I have the building. I'm a automotive instructor at National Community College. So, being a mechanic is kind of what I do. It's what I've done since I was 15. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I'd also, kind of one of the bigger things I'd like to address are some of the concerns of some of my neighbors. Bill LeBakes was the first that we saw, and they've been in the neighborhood for 50 plus years, I think. So that, obviously, when I saw that, I wanted to make sure I went out forward and talked to them. So I spoke to them about some of their concerns this afternoon, and understandably so, their big concern is, a couple of concerns, but definitely a big one is noise. And the image when it says motorcycle service kind of conjures up images of people riding around Harleys and making noise and me test driving bikes up and down the street and such. And being the work that I do is specialized in motorcycle suspension, primarily race bikes, which is my hobby. I race motorcycles. So the work that I do is those components. So most of the things that I work on are actually the components of the motorcycle. So people would drop off the shock absorber or the forks. I service them, and then they pick them back up, is the idea on how that would work. So it's very rare that I would have a motorcycle showing up to the property or leaving the property running. If a full motorcycle is brought, it's a race bike, it's not registered. So it would show up on the back of the truck or in a trailer. So that would be the only possible traffic on the street that people would be concerned about. So I think that's a major issue. The noise is hugely understandable. The traffic, being that my primary job is teaching, that's my primary job. So this is more of a part-time hobby type thing. Just trying to make sure I'm doing everything by the book and I'm not gonna get in trouble anywhere. So that's kind of why we're going through all this process, is just make sure everything's legal, everything's done proper. And then, so another concern of the LeBakes was concern for it being a residential neighborhood, and I fully understand that too. We don't want to live right next to a store or a shop or something like that. And being that there would be no changes to the property, and as I said, it's limited traffic, being just because of the type of work that I'm asking to be able to do. I don't think it would change the neighborhood at all. Most people drive by, they don't know that there is a garage out back. And then even, speaking with the LeBakes, I actually checked out the LeBakes garage when I built mine, because he has a small 2020 garage at his house. So I think that would address their concerns. Our other neighbor that had a concern, the Martins, I spoke to them this afternoon too, and their concerns were similar to LeBakes, and again, understandably so. People are imagining motorcycles going up and down the street, Harleys taking off from the stoplight stuff, or the stop sign at the end of the road, things like that. And again, it's the same. I had the same conversation with them, and once I did, both families were much at ease. I don't know if they were going to send a letter in, but I at least wanted to talk to them and make sure they kind of understood what my idea was and how it would be affected. And both of them were very happy that I stopped by. Hopefully that addresses their concerns and maybe any concerns that you would have. And then as far as talking with my direct neighbors, the ones that are the actual abutters, I have a letter of support from both sides of the street. They're supportive of it. And then my neighbor to the back, I stopped by and spoke with him also. He didn't send a letter or anything like that, but he has no concern over what I'm doing. So I think that's it. There's going to be no changes to the structure. There's nothing outside the building. I have no plans of putting up any kind of sign or drawing any kind of attention to what I'm doing. I very much enjoy that the garage is kind of hidden out back, and people don't know that I'm here. I don't like people knowing that I have things. I think that's it. So I guess if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you. Does anyone on the board have any questions for the applicant?
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Courier?
Yes, thank you for the floor. You know, after hearing your testimony, Mr. Hogan, I mean, I too believe that what you're proposing isn't like a big loud business. It's almost more like a machine shop in a way. People are leaving off parts and you're kind of working them inside as opposed to like an RJ Motorsport facility. One of the things that we're challenged with is, you know, variances or variance requests run with the land. There are a couple of things you said that, to me, I think could help pull this together. Is you had mentioned, like, that you would not have a sign, and I was wondering if we were to say have that as a stipulation, if that would be, you know, acceptable. And there were, I guess, two other conditions. Did you? It sounds like you don't, but I need to get the question out. Do you have any plans on doing, you know, New Hampshire state motorcycle inspections or no?
No. You can't, with my knowledge of automotive stuff, you can't turn away anyone for a state inspection. You have to accept that. And what I do is very specialized, and I have no interest in working on most of the stuff that I do, or, you know, kind of plan on doing. It's word of mouth. It's people I race with. It's not mostly street bike stuff, so there'd be no interest in doing state inspections, and I would be more than happy to not, I don't want a sign. So yeah, if you said no sign, I would be very happy with that rule.
Yeah. Okay, so, again, you'd be okay with like no New Hampshire motorcycle inspection?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that I was struggling with this application, you know, because of the noise, which you've addressed, but then I was thinking, well, how could that be controlled when I got, you know, your written application, and again, see it more like as a quieter machine shop versus an exterior noisy operation. What I would be concerned about is, you know, as time goes on, when you move on, somebody else, you know, doesn't have those same kind of quiet aspirations as you, that they could move in there, and then it could be, you know, a Gate City cycle overnight with a new owner. But to me, a stipulation like that sets a precedent that, at least for me, I don't know about the other board members, that it would really be stipulated that it's a quieter business. You had mentioned about, are all the machines you work on, are they all non-registered?
Not all. I mean, some friends have street bikes.
Yeah,
and so in that case, it would be a street bike that, you know, maybe some of them deliver it in the back of a vehicle because the weather's poor, and everything tends to be a little more on the high-end stuff. You know, I'm not working on low-end motorcycles. It's all pretty high-end stuff. So it might be delivered on a truck, or it might be ridden here.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that answers your question, though. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, it did. So I'm all set for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Lionel?
Yeah, just to sort of follow up on Mr. Courier's comment, although he's right that variance is run with the land, this also is requesting a special exception for the major home occupation, and that doesn't run with the land. So if Mr. Hogan sold the house and somebody else wanted to put a major home occupation in that detached garage, they would have to come back before the board and request another special exception. That's really all I had to say on this.
Thank you. Any other questions from any member of the board? Seeing none, Well, there's nobody here, so no one can speak in favor here, and I don't see anybody else on
Mr.
Zoom.
Farkas.
Madam Chair, there were two abutters
Oh,
that did
I'm
submit
sorry.
emails in favor, and they were on either side of Mr. Hogan's property.
You're correct, and I have them right here.
And also, there was another person who,
Who was in opposition.
they were in opposition, but they have
I
since
have that,
wanted
but-
to rescind their letter.
But then there was another letter of opposition. We do have two letters in support. One from a Monica Savoy, and she lives at 27 Sullivan Street. And she said she is your next-door neighbor, and she's discussed the exception with you, and she has no concerns regarding the special exception. We have one now from Nancy and Dave Marden, who stated they just met with Timothy Hogan. He further explained his attempt on having a business in his garage on 29 Sullivan Street. He has convinced us it will be a low-key operation, repairing motorcycle suspensions with very low volume. We are convinced it will not be a threat to the character of our neighborhood. They asked us to disregard their previous letter, and they sign it sincerely, Dave and Nancy. And there is a third letter from a Brad Busted. Good afternoon. Please accept my email in support of Tim Hogan's 29 Sullivan Street request for special exception of land use. Please don't hesitate to contact me on behalf of Tim. Thank you, Brad Busted, 31 Sullivan Street. Those are the letters that we do have in support of your application. And now I see there's no one with opposition here. There's no one physically here. And the only people on Zoom are the applicant and the board. So I'm going to assume that this is the one letter that we have in opposition. We are sending this in reference to the requested variance by Timothy Hogan for a business at his Sullivan Street address. We live on Pine Hill Avenue and have concerns about additional traffic on one-way streets and the possible noise that this business may generate. In addition, we are concerned about any business being set up in this residential neighborhood, how this may establish a precedent for more businesses in the future in neighborhood property values. There are established businesses along Amherst and Broad Streets, but we do not want an encroachment into the streets between. We just wanted to express our thoughts on this variance request. Thank you for your time. Linda and Gerard Levesque, or Levesque. That is the extent of the letters that we have. And so I'm going to, would you like, Mr. Hogan, you now have 5 minutes to respond to the comments made by the Levesques.
I think I addressed them already. I spoke to Levesques earlier today, and their concerns were very similar to David and Nancy's concerns. They found out about it from David and Nancy. They were chatting about it and such. So the concerns are the same. So I don't think I have anything further to address with them other than saying that, they were much more comfortable with what I wanted to do after we talked. So
Okay, and
I certainly understand the concerns. I have one question. I don't know if I can ask that now.
Well, yeah, I'm going to let you ask the question. I'm going to ask you a question, so we're even.
Fair enough. When I called and spoke, I didn't know if you could tell me, you probably know more. They told me that it would be a major home occupation, not minor. I didn't know why it got shifted one way or the other. That was just kind of because the biggest thing that I can see is somebody outside is allowed to work here. I assumed it was because it was motorcycle, and that's why it had to be the major.
It's not specifically, this is Kate Poirier for the record, it's not specifically for the use itself. We have a list of requirements,
And typically, when people call, I start off by listing off the minor home occupation requirements. And if they cannot meet one of those, such as if they are in a detached structure, or if they have different size requirements or visitation, then we move up to the major. And if major does not qualify, then of course we move up to use variance. But typically in these situations, it's between minor and major.
Okay, thank you.
Since this structure was in a detached, or the use itself was in a detached structure, then it did not qualify as a minor home occupation, even though the visitation was proposed to be fairly small.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And Mr. Hogan, did you see in the special exception part of the application that there were conditions? And I need to know that you have seen these conditions and that you agreed to these conditions. Do you have them? If not, I will gladly read them and ask you if you are in agreement with them.
Except 2 and 3.
Except what?
Yeah, I guess I don't know that I have them in front of me, if you wouldn't mind reading them.
Okay, no more than one non-resident shall be employed.
Oh, those, yes, okay.
Okay, then, oh, I see what you were saying, Mr. Minkara, about no number 2 and no number 3. Do I need to, do I need to read those to be exact, even though we know that it is going to be more than 30%?
Well, Mr. Hogan's already pretty much gone over these in his
He's-
testimony. He just doesn't meet the number 3, which he has applied for the variance for.
Okay, then he does not, then we don't need to go through them again. I just wanted to make sure that in my capacity, sitting here, I didn't miss them. So, thank you, Mr. Hogan.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Excuse me?
One of the things that was brought up by the applicant is the size restriction. When we initially discussed, he said he would be using part of the garage, and I asked him if it was the full of the garage, which would not meet the size requirements, but since he is using part of the garage, not to exceed 300 square feet, then it would not require a variance for that. It is simply for the detached structure.
Okay. So then, on the conditions, we're good. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Mr. Minkara.
I do support the applications. I think it does meet the special exception criteria. I did have some concerns initially, but after hearing the testimony, I feel that it does, and does comply with the special conditions with the exception noted. I think for me, when it comes to the variance, the question of whether or not the variance is warranted is really whether or not conducting this activity in a detached structure would have any significantly different impact on the surrounding properties than if it were conducted in an attached structure. In other words, if that garage were attached versus detached, is there any difference? And, from what I'm hearing, it does not appear that there would be, and I think it is really significant to me that the neighbors on either side support the application. They are the most affected, and we've heard no objection from the neighbor to the rear. So seemingly, the neighbors concur, and so for those reasons, I would support it.
Thank you. Mr. Courier.
I guess I had a question for Mr. Lionel in the discussion, and that was about the major home occupation persisting with the land. Could I ask you to repeat what that was? I didn't catch that.
Sure. As you said, variances, I mean, Mr. Hogan has 2 applications before us. One is for a variance, which is the variance of using the detached structure. And the second is having a major home occupation, and that's a special exception. variances run with the land, but special exceptions do not. Special exceptions are in force only as long as the applied for use is in continuous use. If Mr. Hogan wanted to change the business to go into something else, or if he sold the house and somebody else bought it and wanted to have some sort of business in that garage, they would have to come back before us and request a special exception for that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I just wanted to touch on that. You know, my concern, thank you for that explanation. My concern would be if the next homeowner, you know, sees that there's a motorcycle service approval and so buys the property, and then, you know, so in that situation, as long as the motorcycle service is continuous, then that major home occupation would continue on in the future.
I don't think it works that way. I think maybe Mr. Falk can comment.
I believe if Mr. Hogan were to sell the property, if someone else were to buy the property and they wanted another type of a major home occupation, they'd have to come before this board.
I guess my question would be is what if the next homeowner wanted to have, continue the motorcycle service? Wouldn't that continue with the next owner as long as it was continuous?
As long as it's a substantially similar use and he's not renting it out to a third party to use it, and it's the same type of a use. It's the same thing with like a major home occupation for someone who's like an accountant or does something at home. They'd have to, you know, they could do it that way. Other uses would have to come back, like if it's a daycare or a hair salon, those have to get specific approvals from the Board of Cosmetology and from the state of New Hampshire. So they would have to come back no matter what. But in a use like this, where there's no real state of New Hampshire or any other board requirement or approval, I think if I were to buy Mr. Hogan's property and I wanted to do the same thing, I think I could do it as long as I'm doing the work that's substantially similar to what he is doing. I don't see any reason why I'd have to come back.
All right, thanks. You know, I'm, as Mr. Mancaris said, I find that what this proposal in a detached garage is really pretty equivalent if it were not a detached garage. I'd feel comfortable if the board were to stipulate no sign. I know Mr. Hogan's okay with that, and I think it just kind of helps keep the neighbors, would help them at ease that it's not going to be an aggressive business. So I'm in favor of it. I prefer to have a no sign stipulation.
Thank you. And before I continue this, I have a question of you, Mr. Falk. In the application where he describes for the special exception the general business operations, motorcycle service specializing in suspension of primarily race bikes. If he did sell it and somebody did want to do motorcycle repair but do engine repair, would that be substantially different? Because that's a lot noisier than suspension.
I would say so.
Okay.
Engine repair is, you know, something to do with tuning or
Yeah.
carburetor work or something that's going to require noise and gas. I think what he's doing is much, much quieter. I would say if it's engine repair, small engine repair, like if someone were to be repairing lawnmowers or tractors or chainsaws or something like that, they would definitely have to come back before this board.
Okay, but that, for me, it gets back to what Mr. Courier was saying, and that's why I had the question. And now you have a question, sir.
Well, just a statement about the signs. By right, he can have a sign that's no more than 2 square feet, but all it can state is his last name and his address. It couldn't say, you know, Tim's suspension or Tim's motorcycle suspension. It can't advertise the business, but it can have his name and address. So I think you'd have to be careful with stipulating something against something that he has a right to do. And that would be a sign. But 2 square feet is, you know, it's about this large. It's not that big. I was holding up 2 sheets of notebook paper for the audience, if anyone can't see it, but That's about 2 square feet.
Okay, so you're saying he can have a sign that states his name and/or his address, which any,
Anybody could do that.
Can do.
But that's a right, so.
exactly,
I think you
to
have to be
identify
careful
your
with
property.
Not allowing him something that he has the right to do.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's specified as condition number 8. I have no problem with a sign of that nature.
Okay. Let's see. Mr. Boucher?
I support the application. I thank the applicant for describing what he's doing. I think what to note here is concerns about, which Mr. Currier makes valid concerns about what would happen in the future. I think that, again, if you look at the major home occupations, stipulation number 6, talking about noise and dust, vibration, odor. So I think that if anybody were to buy this property in the future and wants to do anything significantly more than what he's doing, again, a business doing tuning or doing anything else, I think once it starts causing that nuisance for the neighborhood, I think it violates this major home occupation stipulations here. So in that respect, I think I'm very comfortable with this. I'm comfortable with what was presented, and so I'm going to support the application.
Thank you, and thank you for that clarification. Mr. Kanakis?
I'm also in support of the application. I agree with Mr. Boucher that the major home occupation stipulation should take care of any potential issues in the future with other buyers.
Thank you. And Mr. Lionel?
Yeah, I was initially a little bit concerned, but my concerns have been addressed, and we've had a good discussion of this, and I am in support of the application.
Thank you. And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I too am in support. The discussion was a good discussion. And any, I think, apprehensions were alleviated by the applicant. Mr. Curry, I have a question of you. Would you like, is it easier to do one motion for the variance and then a second motion for the special exception?
I think they could be taken together. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. It's probably better to do them separate, I think.
Then, Ms.
Definitely
doing
separately.
separate,
They're two
Mr.
different points of
Boucher.
law, so they should be taken separately.
Yeah, Mr. Boucher, to the rescue again. Okay, then, would anyone like to make a motion? And with the motion, which would you going to motion on? Would we do the special exception first and then the variance?
Yes, we'll do it in order.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the special exception for HOD A44 Revocable Living Trust, care of Timothy Hogan, owner Timothy Hogan, applicant, 29 Sullivan Street. Sheet 61, Lot 110, requesting a special exception from Land Use Code Section 190-47, subsection B, for a major home occupation for a motorcycle service and a detached garage. We find that it is listed in the table of uses. We find it will not create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair pedestrian safety. We find it will not overload public water, drainage, or sewer, or other municipal systems. We find that the special regulations are fulfilled, the major home occupation from Land Use Code Section 190-47, Section B. There are 10 stipulations there. We find it will not impair integrity or be out of character with the neighborhood or be detrimental to health, morals, or welfare of the residents. So again, I make a motion to approve the special exception.
And Mr. Minkara, thank you for your second. Mr. Minkara, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. McCara votes in favor.
Mr. Courier, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Lionel, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
And Mary Ellen McKay also votes in favor. So that is a unanimous decision on the special exception. And now, Mr. Hogan, we will move on to getting a motion for the variance.
set.
And Mr. Boucher, would you like to continue? Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the area variance for HODA 44 Revocable Living Trust, care of Timothy Hogan, owner, Timothy Hogan, applicant, 29 Sullivan Street, sheet 61, lot 110, requesting a variance from Land Use Code, section 190-47, section B, subsection 3, to allow a home occupation use in a detached accessory structure where it is required that the home occupation be carried on strictly in a principal building. It's in the RA zone, Ward 2. We find that the variances need to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property and the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the variance. Again, there's a detached garage. It's not attached to the home, so it's a detached garage at the back left-hand corner of the property. So that is the special condition of the property. We find it is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. We find it will not adversely affect property values of surrounding parcels. We find it's not contrary to public interest, and we find that substantial justice will be served. So again, I make a motion to approve the area variance.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Mancara, for your second. Mr. Mancara, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. McCara votes in favor.
Mr. Courier, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
And Mr. Boucher, how do you vote, sir?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor. That's a unanimous decision on the special exception and the variance. Congratulations, they've both been granted. As we have stated all evening, there is a 30-day appeal process where anyone can question any decision that has been made by this board. Other than that, thank you for your application this evening, and good luck and congratulations.
Thank you all very much for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on, we have no motions for rehearing. Does anyone see any regional impact on the case we have for our next meeting?
I do not.
Mr. Lionel does not. We have to keep doing this because of Zoom. Mr. Mancara,
No.
Mr. Boucher.
No.
Mr. Courier,
No.
Mr. Kanagas,
No.
and myself, no. All right, and we have minutes. Did everyone have the opportunity to go over the minutes? And if there are no edits, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the January 25th minutes.
And a second by Mr. Boucher. Mr. Mancara, how do you vote?
Mr. McCara votes in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Kanakis, how do you vote?
Mr. Kanakis votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Courier, how do you vote?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
And Mary Ellen McKay also votes in favor, so the minutes have been unanimously accepted.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just semantics, you can't have 6 votes.
Oh, I can't.
Right.
I'll withdraw mine.
Oh, I would have withdrawn mine. I was the last one. In fact,
I'm an alternate,
I'll
though.
withdraw
Yeah.
mine.
No,
Full-time
no, you're a
No, I
full,
can't.
you
Okay.
can't.
Right.
One of the
So,
alternates.
One of the
Mr.
alternates
Kanakis was
can.
the alternate designated.
Yeah, you know, I have people sitting, and I
I
always
know.
want to make sure everyone gets included, so that's my fault.
Who made the motion?
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
Mr. Lionel made the
you.
motion.
JP
Yes.
seconded.
Thank you.
And Mr. Boucher seconded.
Thank you.
Okay, then we have just one case next meeting. And is there a motion to adjourn, or can the chair just adjourn?
It's your right to adjourn.
All right, the chair adjourns. We are adjourned at, I don't know the exact time,
It's 8:04.
8:04.